Hello, you. Welcome back. This is the second Pineal podcast, once again hosted by myself and the wonderful Björn Lenz. For anybody who hasn't seen the first podcast, I'll give you a very small window into what we're doing here, just to create a bit of context. So Björn and I are two of the 5 founding members of the Pineal Tribe, a dedicated non-profit organization set up to create transformational experiences for people, but also to empower people in order to take control of their own lives and their own reality. In a nutshell. Now, we wanted to start introducing these podcasts so that we could bring some of the musings that we share between us at our retreats into the public space, because we feel that now more so than ever, as a collective, as a species, we're all going through very similar things. And this has to be one of the first times in history outside of the world wars when we have all kind of been connected to the same thing. So we feel that the time is personal now, for us to really start bringing these things to the table. So this is why we are speaking today. Now, in the first podcast we recorded, we looked at identity, and we looked at how people marry together their personal identity with the different elements in their lives. So it may be the fact that they really tie themselves into their career title, their role as a father, a husband, wife, whatever it may be, political view, religious view, sexual orientation. Like, there's an infinite number of things that people can identify themselves or attach their identity to. And we explored that last week, and why that happens and why that occurs. Now, I've been thinking about that conversation because it was a fun one to have. And of course, it's a big topic. We talked for an hour, but we still didn't explore it to its fullest length and breadth. So it's been something that's been in my mind, and inspired actually by a Jordan Peterson video that I was watching the other day. He was talking to somebody in the crowd at one of his lectures, and it wasn't what Jordan was saying, it was just the engagement he had with this person that made me really think. And it was the need for significance, or the need for status that we as people have. Because he was giving an example, this beautiful example, which talks about the fact that this hierarchical structure of status and significance, which we adhere to as a species, he was kind of making a political point with it, but I'll bypass that. If we look into nature and we look, for example, at lobsters, random one for you, if you haven't heard this already. Lobsters live in a hierarchical structure in their society, and they have their equivalent of dopamine produced in line with where they see themselves in status. So literally their fulfillment and happiness is attached to their position in the social pecking order. Now, Peterson argues that this trait occurred if you go all the way back through the hundreds of millions of years of evolution, back to the point when we and lobsters shared an ancestor. So that same coding that we can witness in nature, for example, here with the lobsters, is actually in the very seat of our psyche, is actually right at the base and in the foundation of ourselves. So we kind of have this programmed into us. And the reason I thought it'd be a great second conversation for us to have, Björn, is that as I think about the topic we had last week, people's proclivity to attach themselves to different things and really tie their identity in with it. As I thought about that, I thought, more often than not, it feels like this is a status play in one way or another. It is, in different times I see people attaching themselves to a particular view. And I ask myself, are you that vocal about that view because you really, really want to make that change? Or are you that vocal about that view because it makes you look good in public and gives you some level of significance or something like this? Anyway, so I saw this inherent connection, and I thought that maybe it could be an interesting topic to explore. How does that land for you?
Well, it lands interestingly. Like, I would like to take this in a direction that you're certainly not expecting, and that is Bentinho Massaro's view on how you find what you're meant to be here in life. As
Who is this, sorry? Whose view?
Bentinho Massaro.
Ah, yes, Bentino.
The story that he tells is there is something that he calls the trail of joy, the breadcrumb trail of joy, which means when you want to find your purpose, what you're made for, what you're here for, you just do whatever you do, whatever comes up, and whatever feels most joyful for you, that is what you do. And the more you do that, the more you always follow the breadcrumb trail of joy. And it doesn't mean that you have to stay with something that was joyful for a time. As soon as the joy runs out, you got what you needed, whatever. And if you follow that breadcrumb trail of joy, you more and more embody yourself. You more and more embody the being that you're supposed to be while you're here. And that kind of seems similar to the lobster thing, in the sense of the more they enjoy themselves, they get more of themselves. We don't have a hierarchy of alignment with. We don't have a published hierarchy of how much people are aligned with themselves. But from my experience, this is a goal to go for, something that is worth working on, because my fulfillment in life grows as I discover more and more what's truly me.
Mm-hmm. This is interesting, as you said it would be. Well predicted. The reason I find this interesting is Bentino, for anyone who hasn't heard, Bentino Massaro, Bentino, second name Massaro. You can find, he has a Facebook and an Instagram. He's really, really amazing, really young spiritual teacher. He's incredible. And I love this breadcrumb piece. I think that's really, really nice. And I get where you are. And immediately as you were talking about, it's like, yeah, that feels good, but that's not what we see in life as a general rule. If we look, if we cast our minds back to the times when you and I were less bearded and more suited, working in cities, my experience anyway wasn't that people were, fulfilling themselves. It was that they were adhering to a social conformity, and adhering to that social conformity and finding your place in the ladder of that conformity was the end goal. And it was kind of that disconnection from what you've just shared, which I think is a far more pure way of that naturally unfolding.
Yes, and this disconnect is so obvious in society. Like, as children, we are raised so that we can be a successful member of society. And what would our parents usually see as being successful? Not in their heart, but in their mind. It's about getting good grades at school. It's about excelling in sports. It's about standing out. It's about, similar to the lobster thing, about the hierarchy in the classroom or whatever, that you impress the teacher with your things. But the question is that really what life is about? And from my point of view, no. What life is about is having a fulfilled life. And if you have that fulfilled life living under the bridge, there's nothing against it. Like we have the examples of in Old Greek where some guy, and I forgot his name, was sitting in his bucket, and the emperor came and asked him, "What can I do for you?" And he just tells him, "Yeah, you could go out of the sun because you're blocking the sun from me." You can have a very, very simple life and be completely fulfilled. If your parents would be proud of you in that life situation, they are probably way too much worried about what the neighbors think of me as a parent when I raise a child that is living under a bridge.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating because it kind of feels to me like we are all, in one way or another, aware, consciously or subconsciously, of this program, of this this drive in, to establish, to gain significance, to gain status for whatever reason. And in fact, let me take a step back, because what I was going to say there is, like, we're all tuned into the fact that there's this hierarchical system, and if we're awake, if we're aware, and we're connected, then the way in which we work our way up that is not through material gain or something. It's through personal satisfaction, fulfillment, and joy. Whereas we're a lot of us in younger years are programmed to think that the financial and the material things are what's going to bring that, and then we move forward with this instinct to find significance or status, but then the system, conformity, and culture sets us up to chase the wrong thing. Now, I was going to say that, but then coming back, so let's look at you, for example. Let's point the spotlight firmly upon Björn. There was a time in your life, I believe, when you were chasing money, perhaps gaining some kind of, correct me if I'm making assumptions that aren't accurate, gain some kind of significance through business success, some kind of significance through your ability to create abundance where there wasn't abundance previously, and just being able to run harder than anybody else. Now, I know that you've gone through some significant changes in your life, and as has your worldview over the past few years. And I think that, you're probably more aligned with the seeking of the fulfillment, or just getting that ray of sunshine and living the simple life. So do you feel, comparatively speaking, do you feel firstly like you can identify the need for significance and status in your old life?
Yes.
And do you feel like it's still there now or not? Or if it is it different? How does it feel?
Yeah. Thank you for the invitation of being in the spotlight. I like that very much. Yeah. Risking of boring some of you, I don't know. I tell the whole story. Please. My father is a math teacher at a gymnasium in Germany. And the first thing basically to impress him was getting a PhD in math, because that's obviously something special, something standing out. Then I went into a big insurance company and had a career there, which is basically all about status and leading teams and wearing suits every day and being very important. Until at one point, that wasn't special enough, that wasn't outstanding enough for me. And I thought, well, if I really want to get rich in this world, I have to found a company. And that I did. And that was another assumption. As soon as I'm rich, I'll be happy. Unfortunately, that didn't work out, except that it didn't work out in a good way. And in one moment in time, I think about 7 years after I founded that company, it created so much money that I couldn't do anything other than consider myself rich. And I realized I'm still not happy. Still have all this work to do, and I don't really know what I'm here for and why I'm doing that. And yes, I create some value for the customers, but in that moment in time, I just realized this wasn't it. And that is when I left the company and basically just dedicated my life into exploring reality from spiritual perspectives. And funnily enough, what I discovered is being myself is exactly what I need to do for the universe to sustain myself. So now I only work when I want to work. I only do stuff that is interesting and pleasurable for me. And I have more money than I had when I left the company.
That wasn't a boring story. Yeah, you didn't need to frame it in that way. I think anyone would have fallen asleep during that. And thank you for...
But the thing is, when I'm at family reunions and stuff like that, in the old days, I could tell beautiful stories. If I'm just telling them about being important in the endurance business, or if I told them about my business, I was always somebody special. And now when I talk to somebody, yeah, I'm a coach. There's just nothing interesting to talk about that. Like,
well, is it that there's nothing interesting? Or is it that when you were previously playing the status and significance game, talking about all your successes at the family gigs fed that need for status and significance, whereas now that need isn't so much there? So there's probably wonderful stuff you could say, but you're not motivated to do it because you're not playing that game. Or is it just generally really boring? Which one is it?
I can see two parts. Maybe it's both. On the one hand, I don't have the answer that is expected. Like when people ask me what I do, I don't have, or maybe I don't like to share interesting stories. And I don't have the need to share at all. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Because when somebody asks me what do I do, the only answer that truly comes from the heart is, well, I'm happy.
Mm. So the actual work that you do is nothing more than consequential. It's a consequence of you expressing your authenticity.
Yes.
Whereas previously, the work that you were doing was the vehicle for you to get somewhere. Essentially, it was.
Exactly.
Now, I kind of think that I like this realm of conversation. The reason I like this realm of conversation is it was 5-6 years ago when I still had my head buried in the sand, so to speak, in terms of, authentically knowing myself. I was chasing money, very angry, very negative. And I know that at that time in my life, there were things that I really wanted to do in life. There were things that I wanted to experience, that I didn't want to live where I was living, eat as well. There were so many things I wanted to do. And at that point in my life, I kind of bought into this piece about I need money to do these things. And then started working with Mr. Peter Sage, who has a fantastic quote: "You don't need money, you need a better strategy." And it's a very doing quote, but I kind of like the essence behind it. But I want to kind of interrogate that piece, because I know that when I speak to people back in the UK, and I do my work with people, not just in the UK, here as well, it's probably the most common piece of feedback I get. When I ask the question, what if you could wave a magic wand, what would you be doing right now with your life? What would you be getting out of bed for? And they say, well, why don't you do it? I haven't got the money. I can't afford to do it. I need to save first. I need to get there first. And was that it for you? When you say, as soon as I'm rich, I'll be happy, like why was that? Did you ever think that through? Were there things that you wanted to do with your money? Like, I can't wait to have a Ferrari, or I can't wait to go and live in the Maldives, or whatever. What was that? Where did that come from? That feeling that money would make you happy?
Well, nothing of what you mentioned. I assume it's just because as a teenager, I read a lot about Bill Gates and his accomplishments and stuff like this. Like, I'm somebody who really likes to do research, and basically, unconsciously, I'm just discovering this now. As a teenager, I basically studied what do people do who are considered successful. Like, for example, when I chose which topic to study, math or economics, I basically looked at the CEOs of the German companies, what are their backgrounds, and I realized, well, most of them have studied economics, but if you compare the number of people studying math with those who were CEO at the time who studied math, it's a way bigger chance of getting there studying math. So I did that. And it's basically just it was my strategy to, to fulfill the need of whoever that was to be very, very outstandingly successful.
Really interesting. Really interesting. And I'm going to draw a comparison with myself here, because our journeys mirror each other's in a few different ways. They're very different in other ways, of course, but one of those ways being that we spent, the first 15, 20 years of our adult life working in the corporate sector, working very, very hard, kind of disconnected from ourselves, and had this awakening moment and changed most things in our lives. So when you're talking about, this past, it's instinctive for me to then be kind of seeing the similarities with me. And what I find fascinating is your drive really sounds like it was bedded in success. You mentioned your father, I assume you had a great relationship with him, to have that kind of drive inside you to really go out there and impress him. And then, your research into successful people. It's like that success, that fulfilling of the potential, that places, that was your driver. And the interesting piece is that when I look at that by comparison, and you may say to me as I share this that you can offer greater precision in your sharing, I don't know. But as I look at this, my whole motivation for money was that I wanted to look like I had money. This was it. Like, I grew up on a council estate, which is social housing in the UK. I can't play the poverty card and say, yeah, it was like we didn't eat. Of course, we had a roof over our head, we had food and stuff like this. But, there were certain things that we, would maybe have to wait a bit longer than other kids for, and stuff like this. And my mum did an absolutely amazing job. So there's no comment in that respect. But it was seeing other people having a bit more material than I had, and not really being able to tally that up. And I remember being like I remember being in primary school, and I remember a number of memories where, after Christmas or after a birthday or something, the children were allowed to take in one present, like show and tell, go in and talk about it. And I just remember this feeling of like embarrassment or shame, because I felt that the other kids, they might have thought the same about me, who knows, but I felt they had better presents than me, and it kind of made me feel a bit less. And I remember we went on this holiday this one year, one summer holiday, we went to like the English coast, right? And we were doing show and tell when we came back, and everyone else was like Florida, Miami, the Caribbean, and I was and these little things, right? I didn't know how to deal with that. I just kind of saw myself as being less. So I always grew up with that as a chip, if you like, on the shoulder, a source of a feeling of lack, a source of a feeling of I'm not good enough. I never have been good enough. If I would have been good enough, I wouldn't have had those experiences, all this stuff. And then when I got into work, it was just all about showing off, which is why I virtually didn't save any money at all. Like, I was just spending because I wanted to be seen to be rich. I didn't want to be rich. I wanted people to look at me and go, oh, how fucking cool is he? How good? Wow, he looks amazing. And like, that is a really, really terrible thing. Like, it's so unfulfilling. And it ultimately led to me, after, a career where I was very, very successful. I worked up to the top of the ladder that I was on very, very quickly. And there was like absolutely no fulfillment. I kind of got to this point where, yeah, man, I'm rolling around in tailored 3-piece suits, and I've got this like, $1,500 watch on my wrist, which for me is a lot to spend on a watch. Some people that make it, that's really cheap, but I'm like, dude, that's still a lot of money. Mont Blanc pen in the pocket, all this sort of stuff, like, completely there, and it didn't make me happy. And the funny thing was that I was talking to friends afterwards, and it's the interesting thing with material possession is when you don't have it, it feels like it's the most important thing in the world. And when you do have it, you can't understand why people get so caught up with it. It's this interesting thing. And I had friends at the time, and I was saying to them, I need something else in my career. I need to be doing something else. They're looking at me like they're looking at me like I'm the woman with, a big roast ham under her arm, crying because she hasn't got a loaf of bread to go with it. And that's a really weird metaphor. I heard that in Sopranos, and I've always wanted to use it. Didn't quite land. Maybe slightly out of context, but yeah. So it was this real kind of. That's what it was for me. It was always unfulfilling, and the reason that I wanted to bring attention to that is that I feel that this need for significance and this need for status, in and of itself, is neither a good nor bad thing. It's it's the reasoning and it's the associated flavor of it. Because as I listen to you, and you may say, no, Nick, you're just projecting right now, so feel free to say that. But as I listened to you, it sounded ultimately fulfilling, because while you may have, got bored of it in the end, your goal was these kind of success milestones, which are kept. This is part of your journey. It's another step in the way. Whereas comparatively speaking, if I look back at when I got to that point where I was like, yeah, I got it. Like, it was a new suit, or it was a shiny new car, things that ultimately falter and fail and disappear. So it really feels to me like this status, this significance piece can actually be an incredible source of inspiration, not motivation, inspiration for people. But if it's not fueled in the right way, it can be pretty destructive.
Yes, exactly. And I'm also very happy about my story because I'm very happy with the person that I am today, and all those struggles, even though the goal that I was struggling for may have been in vain, they have taught me so much. And even now I'm kind of like, I'm starting a new coaching business that is different from just one-to-one coaching right now. And basically my goal is to be one of the world best coaches for that. But I'm not driven out of insecurity, but just for the fun of the game, basically. And that's just, yeah.
And is that...
I'm not looking for status in the sense of, I'm not looking to be recognized for that. It's just, I owe this to me.
Great distinction. The insecurity is a fantastic distinction. Because again, if we draw the comparative to my experience with this wasn't for me in a roundabout way. It was to try to impress other people. And we kind of know how futile that game is. Set up to lose from the word go. But that's really fascinating, isn't it? Because it's just that little switch. It's where is this going? Is this coming internal? Is this going external? And we're probably going to hit that point in many of our conversations in the future, because when we understand that we are energetic beings, we understand that we can preserve and waste our energy if we choose to in the moment in different times. And if, as I look at this does feel like your relationship with significance and status was ultimately a beneficial one. It was ultimately a life affirming one, because what it did is it allowed you to build character. It allowed you to enjoy going out there and winning. Is, let's be fair, winning is fun, man. Winning is really, really cool. Whereas by comparison, my relationship with significance and status was all about getting attention from other people. It was all about having somebody else come to me and say, you know what, you look great today. And me going, yes. It was very Patrick Bateman in American Psycho. You know, when they're comparing their business cards. Have you ever seen American? Oh, dude, like, I almost thought to press pause, send you off to watch it, and then we continue. It's a great movie. But Christian Bale plays an exceptional role. And there's just this scene there. He's one of a few business executives, and they are so superficial. There's these incredible scenes where they're bringing out their business card, and one of them brings out a new one, and he's had it embossed, and it has this certain thing around it. And they're all just losing their minds with jealousy, like, because he has this thing that's slightly better. Yeah, so I think that's a really, really interesting insight there, Björn. Is it life affirming, or is it life destroying, onto a better way to put it?
Yes, and it's not about good or bad. It's about everything has its time.
So give me a scenario where, put you on the spot, I know you like that place, where a situation where I'm seeking significance for external benefit, as maybe I described before. In what scenario could you say that could be good? And I know we're playing hard and fast with the words good and bad here.
Well, for me at my time, when I was studying and doing it to impress my father, it was beneficial, and I was happy doing it, for example. Also, if you look at yeah, take somebody who gets a lot of blame at other places. Look at California and the high-tech industry.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yes, there's a lot of stuff going wrong, but we have very, very beautiful phones, and we can do a lot with them. And they were not created because somebody wanted to put something beautiful in the world. They were created from significance, from ego, and all of that. So there is beautiful stuff created.
Yeah, it's a great driver, isn't it? You almost like, it's interesting, I think, to look at any species and see the characteristics of a species which either make it successful or not. And this feels like it's one of those driving things. It's like it gets the entire human race competing with each other. You know, it creates this kind of sometimes healthy, often not healthy competition. And there's another interesting piece there as well that you say, because with your father, you were seeking this significance and this status acknowledgement from an external source, yes, but it was a trusted external source. And for the purpose of my example, I'm going to assume that your dad was a responsible man. He was a maths teacher. I'm sure he can't have been that kind of crazy. You're a very grounded individual yourself. So it's like, if it is
the main point, I would say, well, a very good good thing. It was a trusted source, yes, but it was aligned with myself. It was aligned with my values. It was coming from, like, the idea was coming from outside of me, but it was perfect for me in that time. Like, there are many stories from people who studied medicine because their parents were medical doctors and had the point of view that only the medical profession is the only profession worth doing or whatever. And when forced to study something they have no passion for, it's just that.
Yeah, 100%. And it's absolutely fascinating. As I was growing up, my mother and my father separated when I was about 3 or 4 years old, and my father was still kind of present around the town. He was a very well-known guy. He was a bit of a roughneck, as you'd say. He liked to have a scrap, liked to have a fight. Just a bit of a wide boy, yeah, you know, just that kind of thing. And the funny thing is that as I was growing up, that I wanted the father acknowledgement, as you know, we often do. And, you know, swear warning, it made me act like a dickhead. If I'm being honest about it, it's kind of no other way to put it, because it wasn't in alignment with me. You know, while my father and I, we have the same blood running through our veins and everything else, and there's probably visual similarities and stuff, we're very different as people. And, you know, what worked for him didn't work for me, but because there wasn't that greater understanding of that, and he wasn't always present as well. So for me, it heightened this need for his approval, you know? Yeah, and it was unbelievably confusing, because again, my trusted source, and it's through no fault, he was just him being him, you know. It's not like he was trying to influence me in a certain way. He was him being him, and I was trying to be something that I absolutely wasn't. You gasped as if you're about to speak then.
Yes. The one thing that energizes you, that allows you to move forward, and that also pushes you forward, is whenever you're able to acknowledge yourself. And the thing is, when you do something that is not in alignment with yourself, so you can value yourself for doing it and you can acknowledge yourself for it, you become happy, because your own acknowledgement is something that is ingrained in our source, that we are looking for that. And whenever you're looking for outside acknowledgement, there are two difficulties. One is, it's hard to work for outside acknowledgement because it's not truly in line with yourself. And the other piece is, when we do not acknowledge ourselves, and therefore we have this longing for acknowledgement, and we're looking for that acknowledgement outside of us, even if we get it, it is not fulfilling, because what we're searching for is our own acknowledgement.
Yeah. We're searching for something which is, what you're looking for is inside you. Teachers have been telling us that for a long time, haven't they? Yeah. I think this has been really informative. I kind of feel like I've had a little mini coaching session with you. It's been great. Well, I'm sure you probably would have acted slightly differently if we were in that setting, but I say that because as I look at this is kind of a path of thought that it's really useful for me to go down, but I've kind of never just sat down and really walked through it. And the interesting thing is that now, while I feel like I don't have this continuous program running, hunting for status and significance, which I used to have, it was like a 24/7 thing. It still does manifest in different areas of my life. And if I look at those areas of my life where I find myself seeking that significance, the moment I activate that program and start seeking it, it's like I diminish myself. Let me give you an example, right? I can be doing a super intense training session in the gym. Like, I have exceptional stamina and I like the pain that comes from it. So I just keep going, basically. Now I can easily do 2 to 3 hours, really, really intense, super heavyweight, and be completely fine afterwards. The moment that I acknowledge a pretty girl or somebody like that in the gym, and I start thinking, I notice my whole mindset changes. I'm thinking, oh, what can I do that allows me to flex? You know, like my ego kicks in. Like I want her to see me and know how awesome I am. Or it may not even be a pretty girl. It could be the fact that, you know, because I appreciate athletic people because I know it's a challenging thing. So if a guy walks in who's like particularly in great condition, like, guy's getting amazing, I find myself doing the same thing. And what is fascinating here, and this is why I love these intense sessions and allowing your mindset to move during the session, is when you are trying to use every spare bit of strength you have, it's very obvious when a chunk of it disappears. It's very obvious when you have a drop. And like I say, I can be absolutely limitless in my strength the moment that I move into that ego space, and the moment that I want this kind of acknowledgement, significance, status, you can knock 25% off of every weight that I'm doing in the gym. And more often than not, if I feel that and don't get out of it, my session ends 10 minutes later.
Yeah, questions are a very powerful tool. And the thing is, you're training, you're happy with yourself, you're just expanding. And then you see a girl, and the question that I would guess enters your mind is, am I good enough?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Because there was a point the other day, right? It was about 3-4 days ago. I was ruined. Like, I'd gone hard. I'd gone level 10 hard. I kind of felt sick, like I might faint. I was in a really, really sketchy way. I go to walk out the gym. Pretty girl walks into the gym. I immediately think about turning around and training again. Right now, here's the thing. As you know, like I'm in a relationship. I'm not out there looking for girls, and in a situation, even if it were offered to me on a plate, like, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that to my partner, but I wouldn't do it to myself as well. Like, because I would know I would feel shame, and I don't want to carry that with me. Like this, it just doesn't work. Yet that feeling for that significance and that status still exists in the same way as it did, if, you know, in my younger years when I perhaps would have wanted to follow through with something. It's interesting.
So, thank goodness we're not in a coaching session, because otherwise I would have to ask, you know, what do you love about being taken down by beautiful girls while training? Why do you enjoy it so much?
Do you know what is hilarious that you say that line now? Is when I was thinking about suggesting a topic, I was just going to say to you, how about we record a live coaching session and see how that lands? just to go through it, and you say this. So look, let's play the game. I can't be seen to be evasive. That won't do anything for my status and significance. So what's the question?
What do you love so much about, what do you value about being brought down by girls when training? Like when you go out there and you see a beautiful girl walk in, you know, at least part of you know that the experience in there will be painful, because you will compare yourself to the other guys. You will not flex in your center. You will not train in your center. You will just try to be somewhere where she has to see you, whatever. It will be painful. What do you love about it so much?
Yeah, look, it's, for me, it is this, I don't just want to throw out a cliched saying, but it is what it is. I mean, it's this feeling of inadequacy.
It is exactly the story that you were telling about bringing the presence to class and having not being good enough as a child. You're basically,
Yes.
what do you love about your childhood's pain so much that you'd like to relive?
Well, it did make me feel special. I was the only one in the class in that boat. No, no, and this I think this is like one of the master questions, I think, when it comes to a growth-centric life. You know, what is it that is so magnificent about your BS that makes you live with it 24/7? And what is interesting, I'm going to share something now. I'm going to bring some vulnerability into the space. What is interesting is I noticed that I have a tendency to smoke too much cannabis in moments. Now I go on and I go off. And I noticed that times when I am smoking, so just to come back, if we look at the Hawkins scale of calibration, cannabis calibrates in the region of around 350 acceptance. And this is one of the things that the actual, the substance makes you do. It just makes you accept it. Like, you're just happy with anything. Like, it just makes you happy being bored, basically. Not just sitting there doing nothing. But I find that I haven't done my work with it properly. The feeling of being able to see when I was a kid, I've done some work with it, but I haven't done my work with it enough, which means that these wounds, this trauma, it like bubbles around in here. And every so often, bloop, bloop, it ruptures out. Now, in those moments it ruptures out, one of two things happens. I either feel the experience of suffering for a moment, address it, do my work, get through it, and then I'm normal. Or I don't, and I don't deal with it, and I decide I'm going to run from it. And then, you know, kind of like when lava comes from the core of the earth and breaks through to become a volcano, it steadily builds until there is an explosion. And I find that's when I run to my safety net, my comfort blanket, whatever you want to call it, my acceptance giving cannabis, which then kind of makes people like, oh yeah, everything's fine, everything's cool. So I answer your question a long way around, mainly because I didn't have a short answer, but also because
just describe your pattern, and now you know that the one thing you have is choice.
This is it, you know, and it is this pattern that keeps that childhood feeling, whatever it is, in place, keeps it there. Yeah, interesting. Funny thing is, if we ever do a live coaching call, there's going to be moments of absolute silence where I just kind of drift off into deep thought, like I really want to do right now. It's just triggered something. Oh, that's an interesting train of thought. I want to wander down that one. But it really is interesting. And just to move the conversation on a little bit, I have two children, as you know. I have Evelyn, who's 5, Oliver, who's 8. And Oliver's very much at the age now where I see he has this need for significance and status in my eyes. In other moments, you can see he has it with his friends, his little friend group. And generally, you know, I see this manifest. I see this come through. And I think in parenthood, I think understanding this status significance piece, understanding the things that we've explored on this call, the fact that if there is a trusted source in alignment with you, then it can be an incredibly nourishing and inspirational thing. If it's not, and if it's not managed, then it can lead to destructive behavior. And then for me as a parent, this really is demystifying, because it allows you to actually harness the power of this need for significance and status that we all have within us, without creating damage or the feeling of less or the feeling of inadequacy.
Yes. Here's a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Like everything you said is obviously correct. Yet what if parenting isn't actually about parenting? What if your child's basic function is to be there to mirror you, your points to look at? What if your child is as infinite as you are, and probably more aware of it because he's better connected than you are, because he has smoked less cannabis in his life?
Yeah.
Consciously, obviously, but why that way?
Well, I think it's a very beautiful notion, because I very much feel that way in intimate relationships. Like Nina and I have been together nearly 11 years. There's been some super rocky roads along the way. There's been lots of challenges along the way, but it's been amazing. And the things that I've been really pissed off with over the times when we've had bad times were, things that I did in myself, and I was seeing her do them, and it fucking wound me up the most. As we know how that works. But the interesting thing is, I kind of haven't really taken that notion further than that, like outside of those intimate relationships. And that's very interesting, because even just thinking about Oliver now, it's kind of like, you can't have that awareness in your head. You can't say not have that awareness, then have that awareness and act the same. You can't. It's a bit of a mind bender. It's kind of like this, when you think about it like that, they are there to mirror back to you. It shows you the symbiotic and synergetic nature that we all have with each other. And again, spiritual teachers have been telling us for many, many years now, many generations, that in one way or another, we are all connected, we are all one. We know that cutting edge science is demonstrating that in a number of different ways. But in the same way as the river and the lake exchange water, and it goes between them and it works between them, and they are essentially the same body of water, but they're ultimately separate, it's the exact same thing here between us and other people. There's the exchange back and forth. The separation is only a perception. And that is it. And to not see it in that way is almost like putting a dam in the river. You cut off one of your access points.
Yes, and how could it be any different if this game we call life is mainly about discovering who you truly are? How could it be better constructed with just surrounding yourself with mirrors where you can look into or not?
It's kind of hilarious when you think about it. It's like, come here with amnesia, surrounded by mirrors, get angry with the mirrors, reject the mirrors. Like, everything is there for us, right in front of our faces. You give me a lot to think about there, Björn, in a really beautiful way.
But I would like to mention one closing thought. When I look at my father, he was a kind of split personality, like not in any medical sense, but on the one hand, perfection and stuff like this, like accomplishment, was very important for him. That's why he studied mathematics. But he became a teacher and was very interested in social politics. And for example, one story I have still vividly in my mind is when he explained why he never went into a consultancy, because then he would have to work for companies that then lay off people because of his work, and then you would feel bad and all that. Like, on the one hand, he was driven by significance, and on the other hand, he was very driven away by significance.
Mm.
And what if I, as his son, basically could help him live this out for a while, be very successful for him? But when it's done, it's done.
Mm.
And now he can be happy and I can be happy.
Mm. Very beautiful. Very beautiful. I have nothing else to say off the back of that. Just thought. Just to sit with it. Well, look, I think I'm complete. You'll notice, anyone watching this, that in the last 5 or 10 minutes, I've kind of struggled to speak. Björn has this ability to send me into thought tangents, and now I'm trying to come back, so I'm present here. But no, beautiful. And look, I think it's I think what we've explored today has not only been, personally, I find it very interesting, but it's been illuminating for me, for us to have a look at these different aspects. And it's like anything in this kind of growth centric, spiritual, personal development space, whatever we want to call it. There's a lot of stuff that sounds really cool, but ultimately isn't that useful. Like, there's so many things, gimmicky or whatever, so many, got to do this, got to do that, got to whatever. But when we touch on something like we did today, it excites me, it exhilarates me, because I feel like this is where the real gold is in evolution, in personal evolution, is in being able to have the conversations we had today and see the very subtle distinctions between things. Because within these subtle distinctions, I think, is where the magic lies, is where the keys are hidden. So I think it's been very useful personally. I hope it's been useful for you as well, and I hope for anybody else watching, it's been useful. Is there anything else you want to say to feel complete, Björn?
I am.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you for your time. Thank me for my time. And thank anyone watching for your time. It's been great to have you with us. You've been hilarious throughout. And we'll do another one soon, provided everyone is happy with us doing them. So anyway, I'm waffling now. Have a lovely day. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you soon.